그날은 역사 속 사건이 아니다. 두려움 앞에 멈추지 않는 태도이며 포기하지 않고 나아가려는 마음이다. 그것이 지금 우리의 자세이고 모두가 기억해야 할 광복이다. 두려움에 맞서는 포기하지 않는 용기. 광복 80년. 과거가 아닌 내일을 여는 희망찬 시작. 빛나는 발걸음. 새로운 길. 광복 80년.
With her calm voice, anchor Bae Eun-ji delivers news you can trust. From global issues to domestic affairs, the key points are presented clearly and concisely. We offer a balanced perspective through in-depth interviews with experts and on-the-ground reports. News that reads the world. Join us on New Day at Arirang. Feel intimidated by science? In truth, it's deeply connected to our lives.
As a result,
We visit world-renowned scientists in their research labs,
Frida picks up a brush and
ask questions about the future, and search for answers through lectures. In this rapidly changing era, where are we headed? Together, we imagine the future envisioned by science. Untold stories between Korea and the world. Diplomat Archive Hidden Stories reveals them all. With embassies in Korea, we delve into behind-the-scenes diplomacy, revisiting what built trust, cooperation, and lasting friendships. Witness moments of trust and mutual exchange that transcend borders.
over last week's and this week's episodes.
How much do you know about Korean culture? One Day, 1K Culture captures the diverse cultural scenes happening in Korea today, highlighting movies, theater, people, and trends. From everyday landscapes to spotlights on people and arts and culture that inspire. Enjoy an episode of new K content every day from various perspectives.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
South Korea's top diplomat says he believes U.S. President Donald Trump's leadership could resume talks between Washington and Pyongyang. But he also notes the U.S. is firm that North Korea cannot have nuclear weapons. And North Korea claims it hasn't taken down its propaganda loudspeakers directed at South Korea, rebutting Seoul's claim that Pyongyang has. Instead, it's once again made clear of its hostile stance toward the South. The South Korean economy continues to face challenges in sectors like construction investment, but also sees signs of a subtle yet tangible improvement, like increased consumption. U.S. President Donald Trump's leadership could help find a breakthrough in the long-stalled North Korea nuclear talks, South Korea's foreign minister says. But he also pointed out that North Korea as a nuclear-armed state won't be acceptable to Washington. Our Kim Bo-kyung searches off.
The United States would not accept North Korea as a nuclear-armed state. This is what South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun said on Thursday while speaking to reporters. He shared his views on a variety of issues, including Pyongyang-Washington ties. According to Cho, during last month's visit to Washington, he conveyed his view to the U.S. that he hopes U.S. President Donald Trump's leadership could help find a new breakthrough in the long-stalled nuclear talks with the North. He also underlined that there could be a tug-of-war before any breakthrough.
North Korea would want to talk with the U.S. as a nuclear-armed state. But the U.S. stance is that the North cannot have nuclear weapons. So it's going to take a lot of back and forth.
Strategic flexibility and alliance modernization were among the hot topics reporters asked Cho. He declined to give details ahead of the summit, but did point out that the ROK-U.S. alliance needs an expansion in technology as the world has changed a lot.
I think expanding and deepening the South Korea-U.S. alliance into a comprehensive future-orientated alliance that encompasses technologies like nuclear power, shipbuilding, AI, quantum, and biotechnology as part of a broader tech alliance is the right way to effectively utilize the alliance in response to the current challenging and changing international order.
When it comes to President Lee Jae-myung visiting Japan before the U.S., he said this was possible as the government underlines practicality. And for China, Cho did say there are fundamental differences between Seoul and Beijing, but emphasized the need to engage more to overcome such differences based on a pragmatic approach. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In the meantime, North Korea has denied dismantling loudspeakers directed across the border toward South Korea, as earlier reported by officials here. Now, the Ministry of Unification says it'll come up with measures to stabilize inter-Korean relations. Cha Young-kyung has more.
Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, has rejected Seoul's conciliatory measures and reaffirmed Pyongyang's intent to maintain its hostile stance. In a statement released through the North state-run Korean Central News Agency on Thursday, Kim dismissed recent measures by the Lee Jae-myung administration, which took office in June, pledging to mend strained ties with North Korea. Lee's government has halted anti-Pyongyang loudspeaker broadcasts, moved to ban leaflet balloon launches into the north, and repatriated North Koreans who had drifted south in wooden fishing boats. Responding to Lee's remarks on Tuesday that the North has also removed some loudspeakers, Kim called it, quote-unquote, groundless speculation and a manipulation of public opinion, insisting North Korea has not dismantled the loudspeakers deployed along the border and doesn't intend to do so. Also in her statement, Kim Yo-jong criticized adjustments to the upcoming Korean-U.S. Uji Freedom Shield joint military exercise starting on August 18th, dismissing them as, quote-unquote, worthless and futile. Meanwhile, at a briefing on Thursday, South Korea's Ministry of National Defense said the military had explained the facts based on its observations of North Korea removing speakers. It urged caution against being swayed by the intent behind North Korea's announcements, adding it has often made unfounded claims. A military official said, quote-unquote, there is a possibility that Kim made such a statement because she did not want the regime to appear to be taking down the loudspeaker in response to the South's removal of its loudspeakers from border areas, adding that one loudspeaker had been removed from the border. Regarding Kim's hostile stance, the Ministry of Unification said it will come up with measures for the normalization and stabilization of inter-Korean relations. An official from the ministry stated the regime's statement was timed to coincide with President Lee Jae-myung's August 15th Liberation Day speech, the Korea-U.S. joint military exercise, and the South Korea-U.S. summit scheduled for August 25th. 차윤경, Arirang News.
With just about 10 days to go until the August 25th South Korea-U.S. Summit, attention is now on the trade issues yet to be fully resolved. For more on this, we have our economics correspondent Moon Ji-young here in the studio. Good to have you, Ji-young.
Good evening, Dami.
So, Ji-young, Korea's investment pledge is at the top of the trade agenda. Now, what's its status, and are the two sides aligned on investment destinations?
So the highly anticipated focus is on finalizing the details of South Korea's $350 billion investment pledge. We expect discussions on specific investment sectors and implementation timelines. Around $150 billion is earmarked for the MASCA project, a joint shipbuilding initiative named by the Korean government, with the remainder likely to be invested more broadly in critical sectors like chips and batteries. Given that Korea itself named the initiative, shipbuilding is clearly a sector Korea is strongly pushing in these negotiations. The Korean Trade Ministry emphasized on Thursday that the Korea-U.S. shipbuilding cooperation means new opportunities for Korean shipyards in the U.S. rather than job outflow. However, there have been complexities when it comes to cooperation. This is what one expert said about the situation.
One of the problems with the U.S. shipbuilding industry is that right now they are protected by the Jones Act, and that means foreign investment into U.S. shipbuilding sector is restricted. But if they do open up those markets, if they do open up, say, imports of shipbuilding-related parts, intermediate parts, and raw material, then I think this will be one of the few areas where both sides can benefit.
To ensure its success, the Korean government plans to launch a consultative body involving relevant ministries to support this vital shipbuilding cooperation. Yet, the two countries notably hold differing views on this very investment plan. While the U.S. asserts the investment plan falls under its president's direction, Korea clarifies that the U.S. dictating all investment destinations is merely political expression. On these contrasting views, here's what the same expert had to say.
President Trump will probably push very hard for Korea to accept his interpretation rather than the Korean or Japanese interpretation. And it will be a very tough pressure because Trump will be negotiating not just for the Korean deal, but he's probably going to use the results from the Korean deal and reinterpretation as a model for Japan, European Union, and other countries as well.
I see. Ji-young, now another critical point is that Trump's proposed 100% tariffs on foreign-made semiconductors. The question is, how much of an impact are we expecting from here?
So these potential chip tariffs could have far-reaching implications, especially for the Korean economy. Semiconductors are Korea's largest export item, accounting for over 20% of its total exports. Given this reliance, the key uncertainty lies in whether the most favored nation treatment promised by the U.S. will be applied. Additionally, there's the question of how broadly the U.S. will define the scope of semiconductor items subject to these tariffs. However, Korea's chip giants have found some relief as the U.S. announced that companies committed to building chip facilities in the U.S. during the Trump administration term could be exempt from the proposed 100% tariff. This comes as Samsung has already invested in 2 fabrication plants in Texas, while SK Hynix plans to open an advanced chip packaging and AI R&D facility in Indiana. Chip tariffs have a significant impact not only on exporters to the U.S., but also on the American economy.
In terms of like this meaning of the tariffs, obviously on our daily lives are like completely depending on the electronics such as smartphone, TVs, and internet-based machines. So in that case, semiconductors are going to be extremely important. Therefore, the prices of consumers and also producers actually will eventually go up. So the most important effect is going to come through the inflation.
Well, Jiyoung, last but not least, about non-barrier tariffs like fine-tuning the agricultural market access, what can we expect?
Well, while the U.S. calls for historical market access for its agricultural products such as rice and beef, South Korea has firmly rejected any further opening, emphasizing that there will be no additional market access. This firm stance sets the stage for a critical discussion on agricultural market access at the upcoming summit.
Other countries know that if you push Korea to open beef and rice sector, they know that because this is so politically sensitive in Korea, that Korea will offer opening in other areas to not to get the other side to open beef and rice markets. So at the very beginning, you should expect the United States to push very hard to open Korea's beef and rice sectors. But later, they may be satisfied with gains in other sectors that are worth more to the United States than the rice and beef markets.
Beyond these points, further non-tariff barriers like Google's high-precision map data export will be crucial issues to monitor at the upcoming summit.
Indeed, we'll have to watch how the summit goes. Jiyoung, thank you so much for that wrap-up today.
Thank you for having me.
South Korea's finance ministry says the country's economy is showing some signs of recovery, driven in part by measures such as the implementation of a supplementary budget and also the livelihood recovery consumption coupon. Our Park Junan reports.
The Ministry of Economy and Finance removed the phrase downside pressure from the country's economic green book for August on Thursday for the first time this year. In the green book, the ministry noted that the country's economy has faced delays in the recovery of construction investment, employment challenges concentrated in vulnerable sectors, and concerns over a slowdown in exports due to U.S. tariffs. However, it highlighted some positive signs, including increased consumption driven by policies such as supplementary budgets and the distribution of a nationwide livelihood recovery consumption coupon.
Since the new government took office, expectations for supplementary budgets and the implementation of the Livelihood Recovery Consumption Coupon have boosted consumption. As a result, August's assessment shifts from saying consumption recovery is delayed to noting positive signs, such as an upward trend in consumption.
Exports in July grew 5.9% compared to the same period last year, led by semiconductors, while inflation moderately eased to 2.1%. The shift to an optimistic sentiment on consumption by consumers aligned with improved domestic and global uncertainties. The Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, considered optimistic when above 100, rose to 110.8 in July, marking 4 consecutive months of increases.
Consumer sentiment has gradually improved as political uncertainty eased. Following tariff negotiations with the U.S., economic uncertainty has significantly declined, with the 15% rate matching or falling below that of major countries.
The government pledged that it will swiftly execute the new supplementary budget and concentrate the capabilities of all government agencies so that the consumption coupons can serve as an opportunity to revitalize domestic demand. It also stated that officials will undertake all-out efforts to respond to trade risks, such as supporting companies affected by U.S. tariffs. Park Junan, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has once again pledged stronger support for Korea's independence fighters. On Thursday, the president hosted a luncheon at Cheongwade's Yeongbin-gwan Reception Hall with the families of those who fought for liberation from Japanese colonial rule, a day before the 80th anniversary.
독립운동하면 3대가 망한다라는 이런 말은 앞으로 더 이상 통용될 수 없도록 국가를 위한 희생에는 예우도 높게 지원은 두텁게 하겠습니다. 생존해 계신 애국 지사님들이 남은 여생을 불편함 없이 보내실 수 있도록 각별히 챙겨가겠습니다.
The president also vowed to expand programs honoring these heroes so that they are remembered by future generations. Also today, the special counsel questioned former First Lady Kim Gun-hee, who has been arrested on corruption charges. However, Kim refused to answer most of the questions on the allegations made against her during the session. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Former First Lady Kim Gun-hee appeared at a special counsel's office on Thursday morning for questioning, her first session since being arrested earlier this week on corruption charges. The face-to-face session ended at around 2 p.m., about 4 hours after it began at around 10 a.m., during which the special counsel team focused on her alleged interference in candidate nomination processes in the past elections. Unlike during her previous questioning held last Wednesday, according to the team, Kim refused to respond to most of the allegations.
The suspect exercised her right to remain silent on most of the allegations, and so the special counsel plans to summon and question her again on August 18.
Although the team plans to hold another round of questioning on Monday, Kim's side has not yet confirmed whether she will appear. In a press release, the special counsel team said they were notified that Kim would inform them of her attendance on the day. Earlier this week, the wife of former President Yoon Suk-yeol was taken into custody at a detention center in southwestern Seoul on Wednesday after a court issued an arrest warrant with detention on charges including stock price manipulation, interference in party nominations, and political influence peddling. This came after the special counsel requested the warrant a day after Kim's first questioning, citing the risk of evidence tampering. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
In other news, torrential downpours battered the capital area on Wednesday, killing at least 3 people. Lee Seung-ja has the details.
3 people died in South Korea's capital area on Wednesday amid heavy rain in the region. Over in Gimpo, west of Seoul, an elderly man was found dead in the back seat of a car after it plunged into a river. In Incheon, a man in his 40s was killed when his car skidded off the road and into a lake, while a woman in her 70s died as the car she was in crashed into a traffic light on a slippery road. The torrential rain triggered heavy rain alerts in Seoul, Incheon, Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Chungcheongnam-do provinces, as the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters raised its emergency response to Level 2. Evacuation orders were also issued for areas near rivers at risk of flooding in Seoul and parts of Gyeonggi-do province. The heavy rains also led to train service on the Gyeonggi-Jungang line between Ilsan and Susek stations to be temporarily suspended on Wednesday, with delays on other sections. For safety, trains on the Gyeonggi line between Ujeongbu and Taeguk stations were also halted for the entire day. The Korea Meteorological Administration says 30 to 50 millimeters of rain per hour could continue through Thursday morning in the central region. Total rainfall through Thursday is expected to reach 50 to 150 millimeters in the capital area and up to 200 millimeters in Incheon and northern Gyeonggi-do regions. Gangwon could see as much as 150 millimeters and parts of Chungcheong up to 100 millimeters. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In the meantime, Europe is fighting against wildfires. Firefighting efforts are underway but are being hampered by extreme weather conditions. Our Park Gun-woo has more.
At least 3 lives have been lost in intensifying wildfires across Europe, 1 each in Spain, Turkey, and Albania. And in Greece, consecutive blazes have forced the evacuation of thousands, especially near Patras, the country's 3rd largest city.
It looks like doomsday. We can't do anything more. May God help us and help the people here.
About 5,000 firefighters and around 30 aircraft have been battling flames on both the mainland and islands, including Chios. Greece has even requested assistance from other European countries and is applying for more aircraft through the EU Civil Protection Mechanism. But extreme weather, including strong winds and scorching heat, is hindering efforts. Heat alerts are in place as temperatures are soaring above 40 degrees Celsius in nearby countries, which are intensifying the wildfires. In Spain, thousands have been ordered to evacuate, including over 5,000 in the Castile and Leon regions. Residents in the country's north have also participated in containing the fire, saying the official response isn't sufficient.
The fire brigades with carts and bulldozers, it's complicated for them to extinguish the fire because there are several active fires in different towns.
Amid wildfires that have persisted for weeks across Europe, the European Union has provided assistance to fire-hit countries, including non-member states, by sending firefighters, ground crews, and aircraft. And these efforts are expected to continue as the wildfires keep burning, while the extreme summer weather continues. Park Gonu, Arirang News.
As the recent K-pop Demon Hunters continues to gain popularity, Korean traditional culture has also been coming to light. Our An Sung-jin tells us more.
The dense blue fur shakes as the tiger stands on its feet. Its oversized mask, weathered yet alive, seems to breathe. This is 사자춤 or 사자탈춤, directly translated as the lion dance. It's a traditional Korean dance or folk play that portrays a lion to bring good fortune. But Yeonhee Connect Il, a group of young performers, have given it a twist to it, using a tiger instead. The tiger happens to resemble the character Duffy from K-pop Demon Hunters, but the group say they began using it instead of a lion to combine elements of its fierceness, traditional Korean folk paintings, and the symbol of the mythical Seoul Hette creature with its team color blue.
The fact that this piece reminded some of K-pop Demon Hunters suggests that we successfully conveyed a universal narrative combining traditional themes and immersive media.
Through performances like this, the group works on bringing traditional folk performance arts back to life. It often performs a type of Korean percussion music known as hamulnori. But rather than merely replicating the tradition, it instead adds digital projections or modern media like DJing.
We aim to continue building on the foundation of traditional Korean performance arts while incorporating modern aspects through contemporary storytelling, media art, and choreography to create entirely new stage experiences.
For them, it's not about reproducing the past, but creating works that breathe with the present. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Today, it has been raining mainly in southern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and the Chungcheong-do provinces. About 100 millimeters of rainfall fall in Sejong and Chungcheongnam-do province, and 5 to 20 millimeters more in Seoul and other central regions today. Meanwhile, the heat wave is covering the southern parts of the country. A heat wave warning has been issued for Gyeongsang-do provinces, Jeollanam-do province, and coastal areas of Jeju Island, and a heat wave advisories for inland areas of the Chungcheong-do provinces and Jeollanam-do province. Seoul, Daejeon, and Gwangju will start off at 25 degrees Celsius tomorrow morning, Jeju at 27 degrees. Daily highs will go up to 32 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, Daejeon, and Jeju. Rain in the central parts of the country will continue until tomorrow afternoon. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
어렸을 때 아버지가 클래식을 좋아하셔서 자연스럽게 공연장을 이제 가족들이 다 같이 가게 되었는데, 그때 포피아노 연주를 제가 실제로 가서 봤었는데 그때 이제 너무 멋있다 생각이 들어서 부모님께 피아노를 하고 싶다고 졸랐습니다. 저조차도 누군가의 연주를 보고 이렇게 피아니스트를 꿈꿔왔듯이 누군가도 제 연주를 듣고 다양한 감정을 이렇게 느꼈으면 좋겠어요. 어쨌든 저는 21세기 사람이니까 21세기 트렌드를 또 잃으면 안 될 것 같아서 간혹은 또 가요나 팝송도 많이 들으려고 노력하고 있고요. 그러다가도 또 이제 다시 클래식으로 돌아오게 되더라고요. 그냥 클래식 음악은 진짜 어떤 시대에 들어도 누구나 공감할 수 있다고 생각을 해서 그래서 클래식 음악이 제일 마음에 와닿는 것 같아요. 지나바카오 콩쿠르에서 특히 2라운드 연주가 저는 항상 기억에 남는 게 너무 무서웠어요, 사실. 한 음만 치는데 다음 음이 뭐였는지 기억이 안 날까 봐 너무 두렵더라고요. 악몽을 너무 많이 꿨었고 연습을 하는데도 불구하고 끝까지 안 되는 음악적인 패시지라든지 테크닉적인 패시지들이 있는데 그게 무대 위에서 정말 무의식적인 세계에서 갑자기 해결이 되는 경우가 있더라고요. 그랬을 때 이제 희열을 확 느끼는 것 같아요. 제가 지금 공부하고 있는 곡들, 즐겨 연주하고 있는 곡들이 사실 클래식 음악을 처음 접하는 분들에겐 익숙하지 않은 곡들이지만 지금 제 나이에 가장 잘 표현할 수 있는 음악이라고 생각을 해서 그런 레퍼토리를 준비를 하고 있는 거니까 같이 즐겨주시고 같이 공유해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
held its first debate over the weekend, too.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the Status UN Summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
아리랑 도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 에이펙은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 에이펙 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. As tensions across the Korean peninsula evolve, the ROK-U.S. alliance is once again being tested not just by North Korea's behavior, but by shifting expectations within the alliance itself. Now, with the next Seoul-Washington Summit set for August 25th and talks of a possible Trump-Kim meeting later this year, key decisions lie ahead on everything from defense cost sharing to troop structure, human rights, and diplomatic strategy. And as Washington looks to re-engage Pyongyang, questions are also growing about how closely Seoul will be involved in shaping the process. To break down where things stand and where they may be headed, we're joined by Victor Cha, Korea Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. A big welcome, Dr. Cha.
Thank you. Happy to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. Now, let's begin our discussion with what many see as the core friction point in the alliance lately. In your recent CSIS brief from late July, you noted that defense cost sharing has become Trump's primary pressure tool against Seoul. Could you elaborate when or where exactly did he make that shift clear in your view? And what message does it send as OPCON and troop structure come back into focus?
Well, the whole question of cost sharing is basically something called the Special Measures Agreement, or SMA, which is usually a 4 to 5 year agreement that's negotiated between the United States and South Korea about how much South Korea should pay for the non-personnel cost of stationing U.S. forces on the Korean peninsula. For Donald Trump, he's had a long history of believing that the Koreans don't pay enough, or allies in general don't pay enough for the privilege of having U.S. forces in their countries. And two particular targets have always been Germany and South Korea, because these are also two countries that run massive trade surpluses with the United States. So he puts these two things together, the fact that there are massive trade surpluses and the fact that these countries, in his mind, are paying less than they should for the cost of stationing these U.S. forces. We saw it in the Trump 1 administration, where he made very clear that South Korea should pay 5 times the amount that it was paying. At the time, it was paying just about $1 billion, and he said it should be $5 billion. And now in the second Trump administration, he's talked about upping it to as high as $10 billion. These, in fact, are not realistic numbers, but they are indicative of the fact that he feels like allies should pay more for having U.S. forces in their country.
Right. Then, so if the U.S. actually reduces ground forces while expanding air and naval presence, do you think deterrence still can hold, or does that shift invite miscalculation from adversaries like North Korea or China?
So it's a great question, and I think if it's done correctly, it can enhance deterrence and defense. But if it's done incorrectly, it can hurt deterrence and defense. For it to be done incorrectly, this would be the United States acting unilaterally and deciding they're going to pull a brigade out of Korea and not bring it back without consulting with the South Koreans, without making it part of a larger alliance modernization plan that would be accompanied with for example, increases in South Korean defense spending, enhancement of conventional military capabilities. If it's part of a plan, then it looks like it's enhancing deterrence and defense. But if it's done sort of unilaterally, then deterrence is in the mind of the target state. So it's not so much whether the U.S. and South Korea feel, yes, we can still manage defense on the peninsula. If the North Koreans see the United States unilaterally pulling out, what matters is how they view it. And they might view that as a weakness in the alliance and therefore might see deterrence as being undermined. So this idea of changing the force structure on the peninsula, rebalancing it from ground forces to air and naval, the main message here is that this needs to be done in a carefully coordinated alliance first plan that talks about these things as strengthening and not weakening the alliance.
Right. So it's not just about numbers, it's how these forces are actually positioned by dialogue between the two countries. Now, since OPCON always comes back during times of strategic recalibration, Dr. Cha, do you think it could become a political bargaining chip under Trump's self-defense framing? And how might that reshape the pace of U.S. ROK military coordination?
Well, when we think about OPCON transition, and what we're talking about here is the return of wartime operational control to the Republic of Korea. This is both political and it's military. It's military in the sense that should wartime OPCON go back to Korea, then South Korea has to have certain capabilities having to do with overhead satellite intelligence, general ISR capabilities, command and control capabilities to be able to manage a wartime situation. So there are military prerequisites, and I think the militaries, the South Korean and the U.S. militaries, have a carefully planned out structure that tests and demonstrates readiness at each stage of an OPCON transition, plan. That is the military plan, and that is the way this should be carried out. It should be based on readiness and capabilities and proper indicators of whether requisite capabilities are being fulfilled. The political side of OPCON transition is when this process, which is a military process, becomes politicized in the context of things like returning, and I use quotation marks, sovereignty to South Korea, terms of that nature. This usually ends up calling for an accelerated OPCON transition process, which is not necessarily a good thing because the two sides might not be ready. And again, this has an impact on deterrence and readiness if the North Koreans perceive this as a weakening of the alliance rather than a strengthening of the alliance. So again, here there's a military guidelines for how this should be done, a military process, but it is also political. And I think we need to avoid the political aspects of this and really focus on letting the professionals do this in the right way.
Right, definitely. Now, let's also move on to the upcoming August 25th summit between Seoul and Washington. Though there are definitely a wide range of topics for the two to discuss, what do you see as the real strategic objective for the Trump administration? And do you think there's risks Seoul may be underestimating as the two leaders sit down?
One of the most important things, so as your viewers know, this will be the first summit meeting between President Lee and President Trump. These first meetings are extremely important. They set the tone for the relationship. The personal chemistry between the two leaders is very important. It filters down and it affects the entire alliance relationship. If the two leaders get along well, that's good for the alliance relationship. If the two leaders don't get along, then it could be very difficult. So that aspect of it is clearly very important. As you said, there are many issues to discuss. They're just coming off of the announcement of a framework trade and investment agreement. That's very good. That's a good platform that avoided the 25% or even higher tariffs that could have gone to Korea as a result of Trump's reciprocal tariff and Liberation Day tariffs. So that's very good that they're coming into this with an agreement in hand. They'll be wanting to work out some of the details of that agreement, but also looking at other things in the relationship, as we mentioned, having to do with the alliance, having to do with foreign policy, having to do with relations with China, relations with Japan, the DPRK-Russia relationship as a result of the war in Ukraine. So while I would say the conversation up until this point has been completely dominated by tariffs and trade, the alliance, this summit will provide the opportunity to open space for the two leaders to talk about the broad range of issues they will have to deal with in the alliance, rather than only a focus on trade and investment. That will certainly be part of it. There are a lot of good things that can happen between Korea and the United States, between Trump and Lee, in terms of economic cooperation, whether we're talking about strategic energy or shipbuilding or supply chains or emerging technology or global health. There are many positive things. But again, up until this point, because of the unusual nature of how Trump rolled out the tariffs and the political crisis in Korea from last December until June because of the impeachment crisis, the focus was entirely on tariffs. And now at the summit, they'll be able to talk about the broad range of issues that are important to the two countries.
Right. That gives us a clearer picture of what's really going to be online this time. Now, as for North Korea then, you've previously mentioned possibilities for a Trump-Kim Jong-un meeting during the APEC period. But just this morning, we hear that North Korean leader Kim Yo-jong, North Korean leader's sister rather, Kim Yo-jong, rejected such possibilities. How do you see the chances of this sit down? And if the summit does happen, what could actually be on the table?
So it's really hard to make a prediction about whether they will be successful in arranging a meeting. We know that President Trump is interested in meeting again. He hasn't really spoken about the timing, but he's clearly interested in meeting again. He considers Kim Jong-un to be a friend of his, not just another leader, but a friend of his. So there's clearly an interest on the U.S. side. The idea of it possibly happening around APEC is really based on what we saw in Trump 1, where President Trump used the opportunity of going to South Korea to basically tweet out to the North Korean leader to meet him in Panmunjom, and that is actually what happened. So you can't put that past President Trump to do that again. There are no standard policy conventions when you're talking about Donald Trump. He'll do things often in unpredictable ways. But what we're clearly seeing from the North Korean side are signals that they're not interested. Whether these are genuine signals or they're just playing hard to get, trying to raise the price of entry for re-engaging in talks, it's hard to tell. But right now, very clearly, they are trying to show very little interest towards the United States or towards the Lee government, despite some of the initial tension reduction measures that have taken place by the Lee government.
Right. So, in fact, in the past months, North Korea has openly rejected denuclearization as a precondition for talks, and it seems like they're continuing that stance. So, at this point, then, Dr. Cha, do you think the U.S. should kind of change how it defines success in terms of negotiations? Would starting a freeze or step-by-step deal be now the only realistic option?
It's a good and it's a fair question. I mean, we've been dealing with this now for 35, almost 40 years. Many different agreements, both bilateral, multilateral, many different presidents, many different approaches, carrots, sticks, and none of them have been successful. And in the meantime, North Korea has on the order of 50 nuclear weapons and maybe fissile material for 90 nuclear weapons, according to public reporting. So there is a serious question about whether what we've done thus far has failed and whether we should try a new approach. I cannot speak for the Trump administration. All I can say is that I think the one thing we've learned about Donald Trump in terms of how he approaches many of these foreign policy issues is he's extremely pragmatic about it, and he's not constrained by policy conventions. So while he may say that denuclearization is still the goal, he may be willing to look at denuclearization in sequence steps over a long period of time that begin to look in practical terms more like threat reduction than denuclearization. But we don't have a clear sense of that yet, obviously, because the leaders haven't engaged and there hasn't been any public sort of policy review or policy statements by the president, his national security advisor, Secretary Rubio, or any member of the administration on this particular issue. So I do think this summit coming up August 25th will provide an opportunity for them, the two leaders, to make a statement about North Korea. I expect it to still talk about denuclearization, but at the same time show an openness to talking about how to reduce threats at the same time.
Right, so we'll have to keep close tabs on how we will have to define progress in the months to come. Now, broadening out to regional dynamics, you've warned that North Korea's growing military ties with Russia now intersect directly with U.S. priorities in Ukraine and beyond. Could you elaborate for us? Has Pyongyang moved from a regional threat to a global spoiler?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair way of putting it. The DPRK-Russia relationship now extends far beyond, well, there wasn't really a relationship up until the war in Ukraine. It was largely dominated by China, but the war in Ukraine provided an opportunity for Kim Jong-un coming out of the COVID pandemic to really be able to retool, to grow, to gain more supplies that he was stocked out of during the pandemic. It was a very important positive step for North Korea. And now it has become a relationship that expands, as you said, beyond simply the DPRK-Russia bilateral relationship to include North Korean troops in the middle of Europe fighting a war, and Russia providing support for North Korea that could increase North Korea's capabilities in East Asia, on the Korean Peninsula and East Asia. So this started out as a tactical relationship, Russia's need for munitions and North Korea's need for food and fuel, to becoming really a strategic relationship where Putin is now able, through this relationship with Kim, to affect U.S. security interests, not just in Europe, but also in Asia. And Kim Jong-un is now able to affect U.S. security interests through the relationship with Russia, not just on the Korean Peninsula, but now in the middle of Europe. So I think this will be a big topic of conversation between the two presidents, President Lee and President Trump. And I imagine that if Xi Jinping comes to APEC, as he has said he's going to do in Busan in the fall, it will also be a big topic of conversation between the U.S. president and the Chinese leader. It is already, I've made many trips to Europe in the last year, it is already a big topic of conversation among EU leaders.
Right, so deepening ties between Russia and North Korea seems to be a very concerning topic for many. Now, let's also touch upon the inter-Korean channel. It definitely remains frozen as of now, and if any meaningful progress towards a Washington-Pyongyang summit actually happens, how can South Korea push back against being sidelined again? And do you think Washington sees it as a concern if Seoul actually gets left out of the process?
So I think it'll be very important for President Lee to make that point to President Trump, that if there is an opportunity for re-engagement, and even summit diplomacy re-engagement, that the South Korean president has to make clear that South Korea has to have a role in this. I think for the previous President Moon Jae-in, South Korea almost had a built-in role because there was really no direct contact between U.S. and North Korea until the summitry started in Singapore and then Hanoi and then in Panmunjom. But now, because Trump does have a relationship with Kim Jong-un and can contact him directly, there is the danger of what's called Korea passing, where they could be meeting and talking above the heads of the South Koreans. And of course, for North Korea, they would welcome that. They would actually try to promote that as a U.S.-DPRK bilateral dialogue bypassing Seoul. So this summit, again, I think provides a very important point for South Korea and the South Korean president to make clear that it's very important for the alliance that that the United States includes South Korean equities and includes South Korea in any direct conversations with North Korea.
Right, and that's something we'll have to watch very closely into. Now, let's also touch upon the human rights narrative. South Korea is considering suspending its annual North Korea human rights report, while the latest U.S. report on that significantly kind of softened its tone on that. Do you see this as a diplomatic restraint or a deeper shift in priorities on both sides?
You know, it's a fair question to ask. I have to say my own view on this is I'm disappointed that the human rights agenda, which was quite prominent during previous U.S. and South Korean administrations, has fallen off, you know, both in a Trump administration and in a Lee government. In a sense, I expect that in a Lee government, a more progressive government where they have tended to de-emphasize the human rights issues for fear of offending North Korea and making it harder to engage in inter-Korean economic or political engagement. But for the United States, you know, this should be an issue that continues. Maybe the downplaying of North Korean human rights is also tied to the Doge effect in the United States, where functional bureaus like the Democratic Human Rights and Labor bureaus in the State Department have lost a lot of funding, have lost a lot of personnel. There's no longer a singular North Korea, a special envoy for North Korean human rights, Julie Turner's old position, Ambassador Julie Turner's old position. I've always been of the view that we really cannot talk about security and threat reduction and denuclearization without talking about human rights. Because many of the incentives that are built into any sort of security agreement include economic assistance and business that the U.S. government and U.S. companies would do in North Korea. And it's impossible by U.S. law for these companies and governments to be investing and doing business in North Korea if there are massive human rights violations along the supply chains, according to U.S. law. So these things are actually very much tied together. They're not separate. And it's unfortunate that they are being de-emphasized at this particular time.
Right, so it does really seem to be important to shed light on the human rights issues continuously on a global scale. Now, finally, before we let you go, Dr. Cha, we want your evaluation. So looking ahead to close off 2025, do you think we're entering a window of cautious engagement or another dangerous cycle of provocations and miscalculation?
You mean with North Korea?
Right.
Yeah. Well, right now, sort of our analysis and studies of this at CSIS show that without any engagement, North Korea tends to be more belligerent. When there's no U.S. engagement with North Korea, this usually coincides with periods of belligerent North Korean behavior. But when we are talking to North Korea, they tend not to do the big missile tests or the nuclear tests, things like that. In the immediate term, what concerns me is we have a summit meeting coming up at the end of August, and we are also at the same time in a period of U.S. ROK military exercising. The Ulchi-Focus lens exercises, UFL exercises, are taking place and will be taking place while the summit is going on. Again, all of our research shows that when there is no dialogue between the United States and North Korea, and the U.S. and South Korea are in military exercises, then North Korea will tend to react to those exercises in a pretty vigorous way. If you add on top of the fact that the two leaders will be meeting at the end of August, that provides even more incentive for North Korea to make a big statement with some sort of belligerent act. So I'm a bit cautious at this point.
Right, that gives us a sobering but much needed sense of what lies ahead. Thank you so much for helping us connect the dots at such a very pivotal moment, Dr. Cha. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's my pleasure.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
"2025 celebrates the 80th anniversary of liberation. A place filled with culture, history, and diversity.